The surgical resident's hands froze mid-suture. There, embedded in the lacerated tissue of the unconscious patient's thigh, not shrapnel, not a bullet fragment, a transmitter, military-grade, active, pulsing. Dr. Morgan's fingers trembled as she extracted the device. Years of field medicine had taught her to recognize equipment like this, equipment that didn't belong in civilian trauma bays. "What is that?" The attending's voice cut through the sterile air. She didn't answer. Couldn't. Because 45 minutes later, the windows rattled with rotor wash, Black Hawks, 3 of them, circling, and the man on her table, the one bleeding out from a construction accident, suddenly became the most dangerous patient she'd ever touched. They didn't know who she was. They were about to find out. The transmitter slipped into the specimen container with a soft clink. Dr. Morgan's fingers moved with practiced efficiency, sealing the lid before anyone could see. The device sat there, innocuous under sterile gauze, its green pulse light still blinking, still transmitting, still calling to whoever was listening. Her hands were steady. They had to be. Dr. Whitmore's voice cut through the surgical suite like a scalpel. "What is that?" Morgan didn't look up. Couldn't. Her focus remained locked on the unconscious man beneath the surgical lights. The patient. The unknown. The construction worker who absolutely was not a construction worker. "I asked you a question, doctor." The monitor screamed. Alarms cascaded across the room in a symphony of dying. Heart rate plummeting, blood pressure crashing, V-fib spreading across the screen in chaotic waves that meant only one thing. He was coding. Whitmore moved toward the crash cart. Morgan's hand shot out, stopping him without contact. A gesture, a command without words. She made her choice in the silence between heartbeats. Her hands returned to the surgical field. Clamp. Her voice carried absolute authority. The scrub nurse responded instantly, metal sliding into Morgan's palm with perfect precision. Suction. Blood cleared. The wound revealed itself, worse than she thought. The laceration had compromised intercostal vessels she hadn't seen on initial assessment. Internal bleeding. Significant. Fatal in minutes without intervention. Tie off the bleeder. Her fingers moved. Fast. Calculated. Each motion the product of 10,000 repetitions under circumstances most surgeons would never face. Her needle driver worked through tissue with the kind of speed that only came from operating in places where seconds meant survival. Whitmore stood frozen, watching. His expression caught somewhere between suspicion and reluctant admiration. Massive transfusion protocol. He needs 4 units. Now. The circulating nurse grabbed the phone. Morgan's hands never stopped. She worked through layers of muscle and fascia, identifying damage, repairing catastrophic injuries with the efficiency of an assembly line. But this wasn't an assembly line. This was war. Even if it was happening in a civilian trauma bay, the monitor's rhythm began to stabilize, erratic peaks smoothing into something resembling normal sinus rhythm, blood pressure climbing, oxygen saturation rising from the danger zone. Morgan's sutures held, perfect, precise, invisible once the wound closed completely. The room exhaled. 7:47 p.m. The timestamp glowed on the wall clock. Morgan registered it with the part of her brain that never stopped calculating, never stopped planning 3 moves ahead. 45 minutes. That's all I bought us. Whitmore pulled off his mask. His eyes carried questions that Morgan had no intention of answering. "That was exceptional work, doctor. But I want to know what device you removed from that patient and why you're hiding it instead of documenting it." Morgan stripped her outer gloves. Beneath, her hands were steady. They always were. Even when everything inside her was screaming. The door burst open. Security guard. Young. Panicked. His radio squawking with overlapping transmissions that could only mean chaos spreading through the hospital. "We have a situation." Whitmore's attention snapped to the guard. Morgan used the moment to check her patient's vitals. Stable. For now. What situation? Roof access alarms triggered. 3 helicopters circling the building. Military aircraft. Someone in the lobby is demanding access to this floor. Federal agents. Lots of them. The words hung in the air like smoke. Morgan's jaw tightened. She kept her expression neutral, professional. but her mind was already racing through possibilities, calculating escape routes, assessing threats, running through tactical scenarios she thought she'd left behind. Whitmore turned slowly, his gaze locked onto Morgan with new intensity. "What did you do?" "Nothing." The lie came easily. Years of practice. "That patient came in 90 minutes ago with a construction accident. You performed a routine wound repair. And now, federal agents are surrounding this hospital with military helicopters. That's not nothing." His voice rose. Other staff members were watching now, nurses, residents, everyone suddenly very aware that something was wrong. Morgan moved to the sink, removed her surgical gown with movements that were too controlled, too precise, muscle memory from a different life. "I did my job. I saved a patient's life." She peeled off her inner gloves. Her forearms were exposed for just a moment, long enough. Whitmore saw them. The scars. Not the thin, precise lines from surgical training accidents. These were different, jagged, old. The kind of scars that told stories about shrapnel and field medicine and circumstances that had nothing to do with medical school. His eyes narrowed. "Where did you train, really?" Morgan's hands stilled over the sink. Water ran over her fingers, washing away blood that wasn't hers. She'd washed away so much blood over the years, other people's blood, other people's lives, carried in her hands. Doesn't matter. Her voice was flat, final. "I think it does. Those scars, the way you work under pressure, that wasn't medical school technique. That was something else entirely." Morgan grabbed a towel, dried her hands with mechanical efficiency. Her mind was already elsewhere, already calculating. They found him. Which means they'll find me. The realization settled over her like a familiar weight. She'd known this day would come eventually, known that 6 months of anonymity was borrowed time, known that you can't really disappear when you've done the things she'd done, seen the things she'd seen, been the person she'd been. She moved toward the door. The patient was stable. The immediate crisis was over. But the larger crisis was just beginning. The helicopters weren't here for a construction worker. They were here for what he carried, what he knew, what he was, and by extension, they were here for her. 2 men in dark suits blocked the doorway, federal agents. Their postures screamed law enforcement. Their eyes carried the kind of alertness that came from real training, real experience. They weren't hospital security playing dress-up. "Dr. Morgan?" She stopped, 3 feet from the door. Her body language shifted without conscious thought. Weight balanced, center of gravity lowered. "Ready." Whitmore noticed, his expression darkened further. "That's me. We need you to come with us. My patient just coded. He's stable now but requires monitoring. I'm not leaving him." The taller agent stepped forward. His hand rested near his hip, near his weapon, not threatening, not yet. But the implication was clear. This isn't a request, and this is a hospital. You don't get to make demands about patient care. Hospital administration can discuss whatever jurisdictional issues you have, but I'm staying with my patient. Behind her, monitors beeped their steady rhythm, the patient's life continuing because of her skill, her intervention, her choice to save him instead of running. The agent's radio crackled. A voice spoke in clipped tones using codes Morgan recognized even though she pretended not to. They were setting up a perimeter, locking down the building, treating this like an extraction or a siege. The agent's eyes never left Morgan's face. He was studying her, cataloging details, coming to conclusions that were probably very close to the truth. "Where were you between 2015 and 2022, doctor?" Morgan held his gaze. Steady, unflinching. Medical school, residency, all documented in my employment file. That's not what I asked. Then I don't understand the question. A lie. She understood perfectly. And he knew she understood. The dance was familiar. The kind of verbal sparring that happened in interrogation rooms and classified briefings. The kind of conversation where every word carried weight. Whitmore was watching everything, taking it all in. His earlier suspicion crystallizing into something closer to certainty. "Who are you really?" Morgan's mask slipped for just a fraction of a second. Exhaustion showed through. The weight of carrying a past that refused to stay buried. "I'm the surgeon who just saved that man's life. That's all that matters right now." The agent's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen. His expression changed, hardened. When he looked back at Morgan, something new flickered in his eyes. Recognition. "We need to talk. Now, not here. I told you I'm not leaving my patient, even if I tell you that patient is carrying intelligence that could compromise national security, even if I tell you that transmitter you found was military-grade tracking technology, even if I tell you that by treating him, you just painted a target on this entire hospital." The words landed like physical blows. Whitmore inhaled sharply. Other staff members had gone silent, everyone listening, everyone trying to understand what was happening. Morgan's mind raced through implications. The transmitter wasn't for finding him. It was for marking him, for targeting him, which meant someone was coming, someone who wanted the patient dead, and everyone around him was now collateral damage. Her tactical training kicked in, threat assessment, resource inventory, defensive positioning. How long? The agent understood immediately. "We don't know. The signal's been active for 3 hours, could be minutes, could be hours, then we don't move him. He's too unstable. Transport could kill him. You're willing to risk this entire hospital." Morgan looked at the patient. Unconscious, vulnerable, alive because she'd made the choice to save him instead of protect herself. "I'm willing to do my job. You do yours. Secure the building. Lock down access points. Get non-essential personnel clear. But that man stays on my table until he's stable enough to survive whatever comes next." The agent studied her for a long moment. Then he spoke into his radio. Rapid commands, professional, efficient. When he finished, he looked back at Morgan. "You sound like you've done this before?" Morgan didn't answer. Didn't need to. They both knew the truth. Whitmore's voice cut through the tension. "Someone needs to tell me what's happening. Right now." Morgan finally turned to face him fully. Let him see past the carefully maintained facade. Let him glimpse the person beneath the civilian surgeon disguise. What's happening is that patient is worth dying for, to someone, and worth killing for, to someone else. We're caught in the middle, and the only way out is through. Her voice carried steel, authority, the kind of presence that came from leading surgical teams in places where incoming fire was just part of the background noise. Whitmore saw it, really saw it for the first time. "Who are you?" Morgan's answer was quiet, almost sad, someone who thought they could leave the war behind. The helicopters continued their circuit above, steady, relentless, closing in. The trauma bay doors slammed open with enough force to rattle the supply. Cabinets. A man entered like he owned the space, tall, gray suit, the kind of presence that sucked oxygen from a room. His credentials hung from a lanyard around his neck, but he didn't bother showing them. Didn't need to. Everything about him screamed federal authority. Agent Richardson. Morgan knew the type, had worked with dozens just like him, men who treated war zones like chessboards and lives like acceptable losses. "I'm taking custody of this patient. Immediate transfer to a secure federal facility." Whitmore stepped forward. To his credit, he didn't back down despite being clearly outmatched in whatever power dynamic was playing out. "That patient is in critical condition. Moving him right now would be medical malpractice. He stays until he's stable." Richardson didn't even look at him. "This isn't a hospital matter, doctor. This is national security. Your medical opinion is noted and overruled." He gestured to 2 agents waiting in the hallway. They moved toward the patient's gurney with the kind of efficiency that suggested they'd done this before. Many times. Morgan's voice cut through the room. "He moves, he dies." Different voice. Not the careful, measured tone she'd used for 6 months. This was command voice. The voice that had once ordered battlefield triage in the middle of incoming mortar fire. The voice that didn't ask, didn't negotiate, ordered. Richardson's attention snapped to her, really focused on her for the first time. "You want him alive? Then back off." The agent stopped, waiting for Richardson's signal. He studied Morgan with new intensity. His eyes narrowed, working through something, cataloging features, running facial recognition software in his mind. "Do I know you?" The moment stretched, frozen. Everything balanced on the edge of recognition. Morgan held his gaze, didn't flinch, didn't retreat. Let him look, let him figure it out. The secret was already unraveling. No point pretending otherwise. Richardson's expression shifted. Realization dawning like sunrise. Then the monitor screamed. The patient convulsed, violent, his entire body seizing with the kind of intensity that meant catastrophic neurological event. The bed rails rattled, limbs jerking against restraints that hadn't been fastened because no one expected this complication. Intracranial pressure spiking. Morgan moved, no hesitation, no pause for permission. Her body responded with muscle memory older than her civilian life. She grabbed the emergency kit from the crash cart, pulled out the manual drill that most surgeons prayed they'd never have to use outside an OR. "What are you doing?" Whitmore's voice, shocked, uncertain. Morgan didn't answer, couldn't spare the attention. Her hands moved with precision that came from performing this exact procedure in conditions far worse than a sterile trauma bay. She positioned the patient's head, marked the entry point with her finger, 3 centimeters above the zygomatic arch, exactly where anatomy demanded, where the skull was thinnest, where pressure could be released with minimal damage. The drill bit touched bone. She applied pressure, steady, controlled. The sound filled the room, high-pitched whine that made people wince, made them look away. Morgan never looked away. The bit penetrated. Blood and cerebrospinal fluid released in a controlled spray, pressure equalizing. The patient's seizure began to slow, his body relaxing as the catastrophic pressure on his brain eased. 30 seconds, start to finish. Richardson and Whitmore stood frozen, watching. Neither man had moved since the complication began. Neither had even thought to move. They'd simply stood there while Morgan had performed emergency neurosurgery at bedside without backup, without proper protocols, without any of the safeguards that civilian medicine demanded. But she hadn't been practicing civilian medicine. She'd been practicing combat medicine, field surgery, the kind that saved lives when proper protocols would waste the seconds that made the difference between survival and death. The patient stabilized. Again, his vitals climbing back toward acceptable ranges, his brain no longer being crushed by its own swelling. Morgan set down the drill. Her hands were steady, not even a tremor, like she'd just done something routine instead of something that would feature in morbidity and mortality conferences for years. Richardson's phone buzzed. He pulled it from his pocket, glanced at the screen. His entire demeanor changed, face going pale beneath his professional mask. When he looked back at Morgan, his eyes carried something new. Fear. Captain Elena Voss. The name hung in the air like a verdict. Whitmore's head snapped toward Morgan. "Who?" Richardson's voice was careful now, measured, the voice of someone who just realized they were standing next to a legend, or a ghost. Army trauma surgeon, did 7 tours, Black Ops medical support, Special Operations Command's most decorated field, surgeon. When operators needed someone who could perform thoracic surgery in a cave with a headlamp, they called her. Morgan's jaw tightened. Former. I'm former. The word felt hollow, even as she said it. Former suggested past tense, suggested done, over. But the skills weren't former, the training wasn't former. The reflexes that had just saved this patient's life for the second time weren't former. They were eternal. Richardson shook his head slowly. There's no former when you treat one of theirs. Theirs. The word carried weight. Implication. Morgan's eyes dropped to the patient, unconscious, vulnerable, his chest rising and falling with mechanical regularity. Who is he? Defector. Russian intelligence. He's carrying classified information about an operation called Cassandra, details that could compromise hundreds of assets across Eastern Europe. And the tracker? Richardson's expression darkened. Wasn't to find him, was to kill him. The device you removed wasn't passive surveillance. It was an active beacon. Whoever planted it is sending a team to finish the job. Could be private contractors, could be foreign intelligence. Either way, they're coming. Whitmore looked between them. His face showed the kind of confusion that came from having your reality completely rewritten in real time. Wait. You're telling me this hospital is about to be attacked, not the hospital, him. But yes, anyone in proximity becomes collateral damage. That's why I wanted him moved. That's why this isn't a medical decision anymore. Morgan's mind raced through tactical scenarios, defensive positions, escape routes, asset protection protocols, all the training she'd tried to bury under 6 months of routine surgical cases and quiet nights. How long? Richardson checked his phone again. Signal activated 3 hours ago. Average response time for this kind of operation is 4 to 6 hours. We're at the edge of the window. Then moving him is suicide. He's stable, but barely. Transport stress could cause another seizure, another bleed. He needs at least 2 more hours of observation before he can survive a move. Richardson's hand moved to his weapon, not drawing, just touching, reassuring himself it was there. You're asking me to defend a civilian hospital against an unknown hostile force for 2 hours, with a patient who's a dead man walking and a surgeon who's supposed to be dead herself. Morgan felt the impact of that last phrase. Dead herself, because that's what she'd done. Died. Buried Captain Elena Voss under paperwork and fake credentials and the hope that no one would ever connect the quiet resident at a suburban hospital with the surgeon who'd once operated in places that didn't exist on maps. I'm asking you to do your job, I'll do mine. Whitmore finally found his voice. Someone needs to explain this to me, now. Because I have a right to know who I've been working with for 6 months. Morgan turned to face him. Let him see. Really see. The person beneath the careful disguise. Kandahar, 2019. Her voice was quiet, distant, like she was reading someone else's story. Field hospital overrun by Taliban fighters, 12 patients under my care, critical cases, soldiers who'd already survived impossible odds just to make it to my table. The memory rose like bile, sharp, acid, burning. Evacuation order came. 10 minutes to extract. But my patients couldn't be moved, not without dying. So I stayed. Operated while gunfire echoed through the compound. Kept working while everyone else ran. Her hands clenched, unclenched, muscle memory of holding instruments while the world exploded. 11 made it out. 11 soldiers went home to their families because I refused to abandon them. She paused. The weight of the next words almost too heavy to speak. The 12th, I still see his face. Young, 22, bilateral lung trauma. I was 30 seconds from finishing the repair. 30 seconds. But the compound was breached. Enemy combatants in the hallway. I had to choose. Finish the surgery and probably die, or run and definitely let him die. Whitmore's expression had gone soft. Understanding dawning. What did you do? I finished the surgery, repaired the lung, sutured him closed, and then I picked up my sidearm and I held that hallway until extraction arrived. Richardson was nodding slowly. He knew this story, probably had read the after-action reports, seen the classified footage. You held off 15 hostiles for 7 minutes with a Beretta and a trauma bay full of immobile patients. Morgan's voice cracked. Just slightly. But the 12th patient didn't make it. The stress of the surgery, the delayed evacuation, he coded on the transport. Died before we reached the airfield. That's why I left. That's why I disappeared. Because I saved 11 and lost one, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I should have moved faster, should have been better, should have saved them all. The trauma bay was silent, except for the steady beep of monitors. The patient's heart beating because Morgan had refused to let him die. Just like she'd refused in Kandahar, just like she'd refuse every time. Richardson's voice was careful. Captain Voss was awarded the Silver Star for that action. Then she vanished, took early retirement, disappeared completely. We assumed witness protection or private sector, never thought to look in a civilian hospital under a slightly modified name. Elena Voss became Morgan Voss, different first name, same skills, same nightmares. Whitmore stepped closer, his earlier anger replaced with something else. Maybe respect, maybe pity. You've been here 6 months, working night shifts, taking the cases no one else wanted, and you never said anything. What was I supposed to say? That I used to operate in war zones? That I've got more combat experience than surgical experience? That every time I close my eyes, I see patients I couldn't save? She shook her head. I came here to be normal, to save lives without bullets, to prove that I could be just a surgeon, not a soldier who happened to have medical training, but apparently the war found me anyway. Richardson's radio crackled, rapid transmission, code words. Morgan recognized enough to understand. Perimeter established. Unknown vehicles spotted 3 blocks out, multiple hostiles confirmed. Time was up. The war hadn't just found her. It had arrived at the front door. And this time, there was no evacuation order, no escape route, just a patient who couldn't be moved and a surgeon who'd already proven she wouldn't run. Richardson met her eyes. "Can you do this again?" Morgan looked at the patient, at Whitmore, at the trauma bay that had been her sanctuary for 6 months, her hiding place, her second chance at normalcy. Then she looked at her hands. Steady, skilled, carrying the weight of hundreds of lives saved and dozens lost. "I don't have a choice." Just like Kandahar, just like every impossible situation she'd ever faced, no choice except to be exactly who she'd always been, who she'd tried to stop being, who she apparently would always be. A surgeon who saved lives, no matter the cost, no matter the danger, no matter how much she wished she could be anything else. Richardson's radio exploded with chatter, multiple channels, overlapping voices, the controlled chaos of a tactical operation spinning up. Evacuate the trauma wing, get all non-essential personnel to the basement, lock down elevator access, secure stairwells. Morgan's hands never left the patient. "No." Richardson turned, his expression caught between professional authority and genuine confusion. "That wasn't a suggestion, doctor. We're clearing this floor. He's already died twice on this table. He moves. That's 3. I won't let him die because you're following protocol. The patient's vitals were stable but fragile. A house of cards balanced against gravity. One wrong move, one transport bump, one moment of decreased oxygen perfusion, and the whole structure would collapse." Whitmore stepped forward, positioned himself beside Morgan. A statement without words. "She's right. Moving him now is medical suicide. His intracranial pressure is controlled, but barely. The burr hole procedure bought us time, but not mobility. He needs at least another hour of observation before transport is even possible." Richardson's jaw tightened. He was used to giving orders, used to being obeyed, but he was also smart enough to recognize expertise when he saw it. And right now, the expertise said, "Stay. Then we defend this room." He spoke into his radio, rapid commands, strategic positioning, creating a defensive perimeter around a single trauma bay in a civilian hospital that had never been designed for combat operations. "Hostile team ETA 12 minutes. They're coming fast and they're coming prepared." Morgan's mind clicked through calculations. Patient status, required interventions, minimum time for stabilization. Then, we have 11 minutes to make him stable enough to survive. What's coming? She began adjusting IV medications, titrating pressors, optimizing every variable she could control, buying time measured in heartbeats. Richardson deployed his remaining agents, 6 men. Not enough for a real defensive operation, but enough to slow down an assault. Enough to make the enemy pay for every foot of hallway. The trauma bay transformed, medical space becoming battlefield space, agents checking weapons, taking positions, preparing for violence in a place designed for healing. Then the gunfire started. Close. Too close. The sharp crack of pistol fire echoing through corridors that should only ever hear the soft beep of monitors and quiet conversations about patient care. Richardson's radio screamed, "Agent down! Repeat, agent down! GSW to the chest, need immediate medical!" The door burst open, 2 agents dragging a third between them, blood soaking through his tactical vest, his face pale, shock setting in fast. They hauled him onto the second gurney. The one, meant for overflow, for stable patients waiting for room assignment, not for this. Whitmore's face went white. "We need another surgeon. Call for backup. Get someone from the main OR." Morgan was already moving, hands pulling on fresh gloves, eyes assessing the new patient in seconds. Pneumothorax, tension building, the kind of injury that killed in minutes without intervention. "We have me." Her voice carried absolute certainty. Zero doubt. This wasn't bravado. This was mathematical fact. She could do this, had done this, would do it again. You can't work on 2 patients simultaneously. That's impossible. I've done 47 bilateral thoracotomies under fire, different patients, same operating table, sometimes with incoming rounds landing close enough to feel the pressure wave. She cut away the agent's vest, exposed the wound, entry point left of sternum, no exit wound, bullet still inside, lungs compromised, heart potentially damaged. This is number 48. Her hands moved, left hand on the defector, right hand on the agent, monitoring vitals with peripheral vision while her primary focus split between two sets of catastrophic injuries. Clamp, the scrub nurse responded. Morgan's right hand worked through the agent's chest, opening the thoracic cavity with the kind of speed that came from doing this when speed was the only thing between a patient and death. Suction. Blood cleared, lung visible, collapsed. The bullet had nicked the pulmonary artery, not severed, not completely, but enough to cause massive bleeding into the chest cavity. Whitmore. Hands here. Press. Don't stop. She positioned his hands on the defector's surgical site, showed him exactly where to apply pressure, exactly how much force. Then she released control of that patient entirely. Trust or necessity. Same thing in crisis. Her full attention shifted to the agent, both hands now, working with the precision of a watchmaker and the speed of a sprinter, identifying damage, clamping vessels, controlling. Bleeding that should have already killed him. The agent's vitals were crashing, heart rate erratic, blood pressure in free fall, massive transfusion protocol, 8 units, start running them now. Nurses moved. The room had transformed into something closer to a battlefield hospital than a modern trauma center. All pretense of sterile protocol abandoned in favor of pure survival medicine. Morgan's hands never stopped. Left hand suturing the pulmonary artery, right hand packing the wound cavity, both moving independently, both working different problems, both saving different lives. Whitmore watched, his hands steady on the defector because Morgan had told him they needed to be, his expression caught between horror and awe. "How are you doing this?" Morgan didn't answer, couldn't spare the breath. Her focus was total, complete, the kind of concentration that shut out everything except the tissue under her hands and the vitals on the monitors. This is what they trained me for. The thought surfaced unbidden, unwanted, but true. This is who I am. Not the quiet resident who took night shifts and avoided attention, not the surgeon who tried to disappear into normalcy, but this. The person who could stand in the middle of chaos and make order, who could look at impossible situations and find solutions, who could save lives when everyone else was just trying to survive. The building shook. Explosion. Ground floor by the sound of it, breaching charge. The hostile team wasn't bothering with subtlety anymore. Power flickered, lights died, monitors went dark. For 3 seconds, the trauma bay existed in pure darkness, broken only by emergency lighting that hadn't kicked in yet. Morgan's hands never stopped moving. She worked by touch, by feel, by the kind of muscle memory that didn't need eyes, her fingers finding vessels by texture, tying sutures by tension, completing repairs in darkness because she'd done it enough times that light was optional. Backup generators kicked in. Lights flooded back. Monitors rebooting with urgent alarms as they reconnected to patients whose vitals were being actively saved. The agent's lung reinflated, bullet removed, bleeding controlled, chest cavity packed and prepared for formal closure once they had time, once they had safety, if they got safety. Morgan's hands moved to the defector, checked Whitmore's pressure point. Perfect, exactly right. She'd taught him well in 30 seconds of crisis instruction. "You can let go now. I've got him. Both patients stabilizing, both alive, both saved by a surgeon who was operating at a level most doctors would never achieve in a lifetime of practice." 8:34 p.m. The wall clock marked time passing. 8 minutes since Richardson's 12-minute warning. 4 minutes remaining before hostile forces reached this floor. 4 minutes that might as well have been 4 seconds. Richardson's phone rang, not the radio, his personal cell. He answered, listened, his face transformed, color draining, expression shifting from tactical commander to something closer to betrayed. The tracker. It was one of ours. The words dropped like stones, Morgan's hands stilled, just for a moment, just long enough to process the implication. "What?" Richardson's voice was hollow. "Federal issue. Requisitioned from our own supply chain. Someone inside the system marked this defector, someone with high-level access, someone who knew exactly what would happen when they activated that beacon. Whitmore looked between them. You're saying this is an inside job? That your own people are trying to kill him? Not my people, but someone's. Someone who doesn't want what he knows going public. Morgan's mind raced through implications. If the tracker was federal, if the kill order came from inside, then extraction couldn't be trusted. Evacuation couldn't be trusted. Any help that arrived might be the enemy wearing friendly uniforms. So we can't trust extraction. Richardson met her eyes. Former soldier to former soldier, both understanding what this meant. No, we can't. New plan required. Hold position, treat patients, survive until independent verification could be established, until someone outside the compromised chain of command could confirm who was friendly and who wanted them dead. Morgan turned to Whitmore. Let him see the full weight of what was happening, what was about to happen. You wanted to know where I trained? Now you know. I trained in places where the enemy wore any uniform, where trust was a luxury and survival was the only objective, where every decision was life or death and wrong choices killed everyone. She gestured to the patients, to the trauma bay, to the situation spiraling beyond anyone's control. Question is, are you staying or running? Because if you stay, there's a real chance you die here. And I won't blame you for choosing survival. I won't blame you for doing what's smart. Whitmore looked at the defector, at the wounded agent, at the surgical field covered in blood and equipment and the evidence of desperate measures. He steadied himself, shoulders straightening, hands still. I'm staying. 3 words, simple, final. Richardson's radio crackled, ground floor breached, stairwell compromised, hostile team advancing. 4 minutes had become 2 minutes had become now. His remaining agents took positions in the hallway, creating a defensive line that everyone knew wouldn't hold, not against a professional kill team, not with the numbers and firepower they were facing, but maybe long enough, maybe just long enough for Morgan to finish, to stabilize, to save 2 lives before the violence reached them. She returned to her patients, hands moving with renewed purpose. Every second counted, every intervention mattered. I didn't survive Kandahar to lose patients in my own hospital. The words were quiet, meant for herself, a reminder, a promise, a line in the sand that she refused to let anyone cross. The defector's eyes fluttered open, consciousness returning, awareness surfacing through layers of sedation and trauma. His lips moved, trying to speak, trying to communicate something urgent. Morgan leaned closer. Don't try to talk. You're safe. You're stable. Just rest. But he pushed through, voice barely a whisper, single word carrying the weight of everything. Cassandra. Morgan froze. That name, that operation, she knew it, had heard it in classified briefings years ago. Black Ops program, deep cover infiltration, supposed to have been shut down after catastrophic compromise. That's impossible. Cassandra was shut down. The defector's eyes locked onto hers, desperate, pleading, trying to make her understand. Cassandra is why they want me dead. The pieces clicked together. Whatever intelligence he carried, whatever secrets he'd stolen, they were connected to an operation that officially didn't exist anymore. An operation someone was willing to burn their own people to keep buried. The door exploded inward, breaching charge. Smoke and noise and sudden violence in a space meant for healing. Hostile team entering the hallway. Richardson's agents opening fire. The sharp crack of gunfire impossibly loud in the confined corridor. Morgan's hands never left her patients. She worked through the chaos, through the noise, through the knowledge that death was seconds away, because this is what she did. This is who she was. The surgeon who didn't run, who didn't quit, who saved lives even when the world was ending. Just like Kandahar, just like every other impossible moment, one patient at a time, one heartbeat at a time, one decision at a time, until there were no more decisions left to make.